Let me start with a story of an experiment that we ran at Notion. What you see is the page that you land after you sign up for an account on mobile. It's a blank canvas. Sometimes it's daunting for a new user to land on something like this and figure what actions they can take. The thing that we did was, what if we add some kind of a help, educative help on the mobile action bar that shows something like this that guides the user to take some action. Right, so we were seeing people dropping off at that blank screen, so we were hoping people engage, people find a way to use and get started here. It's a fairly simple experiment, and you would expect this is an obvious thing. It's going to help users. Things will look good. We ran it for a couple of weeks. We looked at the metrics, and we saw the metrics had just a moderate lift. We were slightly underwhelmed from what we imagined would happen with an experiment like this. The team started thinking about what other ideas that we can go work on to improve things. In the meanwhile, engineer from our mobile team dug into the data, and then they observed this. They saw metrics showed higher lift on Android, but remained flat on iOS. Can you guess why? I'll give you 4 options. iOS users never saw the treatment. Android users like pressing shiny new buttons. 3, we're looking at the wrong metric. And 4, iOS users only are amused by green buttons. I'm sure that's controversial. The real answer is iOS users never saw the treatment. What happened was, after we launched this experiment, after we were running this, we introduced a bug that prevented that educational tooltip from showing to users, and we were measuring with that happening. That's why we saw that. Working with experiments and people who experiment has been a very humbling experience. Experiments a lot of times surprise us, and in hilarious ways at times like this, but then they almost always teach you something about your user, your product, or your business. Before I move further, let me introduce myself. Sid probably said a lot of this information in the slides. One cool thing, that avatar, if you want one for yourself, go to faces.notion.com. You can get one for yourself. You can customize, build one for yourself. I work at Notion. I lead our experimentation, event logging, and search platforms. I'm a platform systems builder at heart. I enjoy building things for people, developers, that then provide high leverage for them to build on top of. I was at Uber previously, where I was part of the data platform team supporting experimentation platform. So I've seen how data is important and at scale, metrics, things like that. And today I'll share lessons from a platform team's perspective. I'm not a data scientist. We have a rockstar data science team as well as a data engineering team who we partner with to offer experimentation as a platform to our product teams. There are a few of Notion people here. Raise your hands. Talk to them after. A little bit about Notion, just to give context in terms of where these lessons are coming from. Notion is a connected AI workspace for all knowledge and work. That's a mouthful. Think of Notion as a set of building blocks that you can compose and build more complex things together, and with AI powering, integrating, working with all of this, it makes it look like a workspace, a hub, if you will, for your knowledge, your OKRs, projects, tasks. You can do much, much more. These are composable. We have third-party integrations and AI that you can use to access all of this information in one place. You can create, capture, search, generate, automate, collaborate with your coworkers. And hot off press from last week, we also have agents now, again, which can do some of this work for you. There are 2 things that I want to call out. One, Notion runs on Notion. One of the advantages that we get with this is it's such a collaborative workspace. It democratizes information. We put even things like our experimentation narratives and decisions that we make, so everyone has access to past experiments, if you will. The other thing is it's a fairly sophisticated system behind the scenes with so many complex interactions that you can have with the product. Fertile field for us to run a ton of experiments, both for existing things as well as net new things that we're launching every day. I'll jump into the lessons. The first one is one size doesn't fit all. in the last few years, helping our product teams build, run more experiments, we roughly see them as 4 classes of teams that we support, engage with. The first is our core product team. I think these are the teams that are looking for long-term user value. They want a lot of stability. You don't want any performance degradation. You want to make sure your features get more and more adoption, meaning people find it useful, people find it in their flow to use and get more value out of these. And then they obviously want retention on these core features, right, that we can then build on top of. They almost always need extremely high quality guardrails and metrics, since the changes that they make to the surface area can affect a lot of users. And at times, these are the teams that are fairly ahead, further in the cycle. They want to run more complex experiments that require sometimes dedicated support to be able to enable them. Sometimes it's a different unit ID that they want to run experiments by, and we engage with them that way. The second class of teams is the growth teams. These are teams that focus on how we acquire new users, top of the funnel. They work with marketing quite a bit. They are responsible for activation of new users who sign up, and then engagement, vital mechanics, top of the funnel type of stuff that I mentioned. The key difference is they run a lot of experiments. They run a lot of lot of small tweaks, run a lot of them, and iterate through them really, really fast. They also look at fairly standard set of metrics. So if you look at most of what they do, it's easy to move them into a self-serve situation where the process is fairly standard. Once you set the wheel in motion, they can fairly move fast. The third is the monetization team. These are the teams that are responsible for our subscriptions, your pricing model, your payments, upsells, upgrades. The key thing is they're extremely high stakes. If you make a mistake here, it can monetarily impact you. They're extremely sensitive to, say, changes that eventually affect your funnel for a bit. And they're also rigorous. They use a lot of back data, back testing to make sure whatever we do here have fairly high confidence in it working. We still run through an experiment, but then they're extremely averse to regression. They have a lot of data science support as well, doing a lot of the pre-work to make sure that they launch well. The fourth is new bets. These are teams that are going from 0 to 1 things, net new products that we're launching, net new features that we're building, and then these are sometimes radical design changes that we make to the product. I think the key thing that I want to call out is a lot of times these teams work based off of user research or user feedback, and then we launch to a small set of users, so you may not have enough users to run an experiment proper. They may run without an experiment. And a lot of times the tests that they're running are also exploratory than confirmatory or causal. So we typically get out of their way most of the time. We are there to consult. We are there to guide if they want to set up an experiment and run and collect data. But then we mostly get out of their way, let them move as fast as they can and get data in other ways as well. Just a little more color to, as you saw with these teams, some teams are high touch and self-serve, understand which teams understand. And the more you move, more of your teams that you move to self-serve, you can free up your bandwidth to be able to work on some of these high touch needs in your company, and they're important as well. The second is will be nascent and mature product surfaces as you go through the growth cycle. It's important to make sure that you don't always compare success rates because they will be different, they should be different, and it's fine. If you compare success rates or optimize around these things, then people may start to do things that you may not want. The third is platform and self-managed. This is, again, a conscious decision. We're still a small team, even though we're growing. So we can't do everything for everyone all the time. So there are conscious decisions that we make in terms of which surface areas we want to support and which surface areas we don't want to mess with and let them do the best they can. One example is our mobile client teams. They own the client integration with our experimentation stack, primarily because we don't have the skills or the bandwidth to be able to support them, but we work extremely closely with them as we make changes or evolve our system to add a new, say, unit ID. We make sure they add that as well. It's important to keep that consistent. Second lesson is the slow creep of chaos. What you see is a music sheet for Bach's Solo Violin Sonata 2. One of my nephews was training for a recital. And this is what his sheet looked like when he started. And he practiced with this tutor over time. He had annotations for bowing, fingering, and by the time he was closer to his recital, his sheet started looking something like this. It's not this bad, but you can imagine. This is just a lot of notes. And then on the day of recital, he gets to the place, he forgets his sheet. And now he borrowed, there's another student who was doing the same thing. He borrowed a sheet from him. He had his own annotations. And you can imagine how it went. He did all right, but these annotations that his friend had marked made it harder. This is what happens. Experimentation platform, this is your code, your metrics. As other teams, as more teams do things, they will want to make their own specific changes that support a specific thing that they want. Over time, your experimentation code, system, metrics can get to this if you don't pay attention to it. Right, so pay attention to paper cuts. This is your code, your metrics, the quality of that. How easy is it to run set up experimentation and run? If things get slower, this is happening, right? So it leads to developer confusion, people losing trust, people start experiments. A week in, they figure they made a mistake. You lose time, they lose trust. And if you leave hood guns in code, this trips people in weird ways where they run an experiment and they're confused about what's happening. Right? It's hard to trust the system. Entropy is your enemy again. As more people add changes to it, it starts to look more like the sheet with all of the annotations. Erodes trust. When metrics bad, it leads to low quality decisions, and people over time assume or expect that to be okay, and lowers the bar overall. The third thing is, it's inevitable as you grow, these one-off changes or asks will come. As a platform team, watch out for common patterns of what people are trying to do, and make sure you extend your system, you evolve your system to be able to support that. Right? Without that, I think teams will feel blocked. They will also not experiment if you don't support them. And in this case, I think tending to the garden works, and it's an important sort of muscle to have, but sometimes it may not be enough. You may have to rethink, once in a while, reinvent the system to make sure it continues to support the new needs without making it look like a mess. Lesson number 3 is see the forest and the trees. I have to have some data here so I don't feel out of place. I need to fit in. So there's some data numbers here. Here's 2 airlines, Airline A and Airline B, and I have data on the number of flights that arrived on time and the number of flights that are delayed, and percentage of flights that are delayed as well. So if you look here, it's very obvious that Airline B did much better than Airline A overall. But then if I start to look at the data by individual airports that they are flying flights into, here is what it looks like, right? In LA, it looks like Airline A did better than Airline B. In Phoenix, Airline A did better than Airline B. Rest of the airports, you see Airline A did better than Airline B. Isn't it unintuitive that your total says something? A company that's marketing is probably going to show that total data and then say, we did better, way better than Airline A. But then if you look at your individual airports, it tells a very different story. What's happening here? If you look at Airline B, it flew most of its flights into Phoenix, where the weather is fairly predictable. You have higher chances of landing flights on time. Whereas Airline A flies most of its flights into Seattle, where weather obviously is playing into it. And you have some more flights delayed, but then the fact that you run majority of your flights into a certain airport affects your total numbers. Right, so this is called Simpson's paradox, a trend where the constituent parts can be master reversed, or the trend in those parts may be reversed when combined. And if you were to think of this as your control and treatment, there's something obviously wrong here. And I guess if these were the numbers that you were seeing for your control and treatment, what's wrong? Yep, sample, ratio, mismatch, right? You don't want to see this. Obvious thing to watch out for. If you use a platform like Statsig, you probably guarded, they already tell you that this is happening. Let me correct these numbers for sample ratio mismatch. Again, these are synthetic numbers. I just took the liberty to correct them. This shows you another interesting example of what could happen if you look at the total and your segments. Again, here, on the total, the control and treatment both feel like there's nothing, right? It's just doing the same. Whereas if you look at this individual airports or segments, you're starting to see different trends for the first 3 airports and the last 2 airports. And if you're a business where Seattle and San Francisco are important airports for you, you do want to pay attention, you do want to see something about what you see with treatment. It's doing better, you want to do something about it. Right, so it's important to pay attention to segments in your data. Sometimes you may be declaring no effect when some segments are thriving. Right, and as a business, understand your key segments, which is very specific to your business, very likely, right? So understand what they are. Make sure you bake those into your hypothesis. Sometimes you're running an experiment purely for one segment, not for everybody. And then in the experiment that I showed at the beginning, you see the same pattern, right? If it's Android only or iOS only, that's a different thing. Or if it's mobile only versus your desktop, that's a different thing, right? So you need to understand and bake it into your hypothesis. Monitor metrics by default with your key segments. Your business should understand what key segments those are and monitor your metrics almost always with these. So when you see these trends, you also watch out for, am I missing a signal or am I over indexing onto something? Lastly, again, don't overfit. You can get into an analysis paralysis of have I sliced and diced the data enough and slows your decision. So be watchful, but then it's important to understand your segments. Lesson 4, measuring the measurer. This is a screenshot of a standard run-of-the-mill treadmill that you used to, let's say, run at home or walk at home. About 12 years ago, a group of friends and I decided to train for a half marathon. This is like 4 or 5 of us, and then one of our friends has previously done marathons. He said he'll train us, and then we decided to do morning runs outdoors. But one of the friends in the group, he was not an early riser. He decided he wouldn't come for those runs outdoors. He would do it in his treadmill. So we start training. About 6 weeks in, I was talking to him over phone, and we were just comparing notes on how fast, how many minutes we're doing, and things like that. I was like, I started with 13 minutes a mile, and I'm now doing 11 minutes. And he was like, I started with 10 minutes a mile, and I'm now doing 8 minutes. Like, wow, great. 2 more weeks in, we get him out. He comes, joins us for the run. We all run, and this guy lags behind. And we waited for a little bit. He kept lagging behind, then we finished the run. And then we were eventually comparing notes and figuring out what was going on. He had his treadmill calibrated in kilometers. We were all calibrated in miles, right? So it's important to make sure the thing that you use to measure is giving you the right signals. This is a treadmill, a medical grade treadmill, where you see the units clearly marked so people don't make mistakes, right? If it's important to you, make sure you do things like that, right? Make sure it has the right metrics, it's calibrated. What does it mean for experimentation? There's a very basic, a fundamental thing that you can do, which is called AA testing, which is a test where you have both the control and treatment get the same experience. This lets you make sure your fundamental platform has all the right things. And then you can trust the system that you're using to then run AA experiments. At Notion, we do, when we start experimenting on a new service or a new product, we do AA testing to make sure the basics are all right? And then once in a while, sometimes teams feel like we're doing a lot. Should we re-baseline? And then, let's say, once every 12, 18 months, some teams do AA testing to make sure that the system itself, the metrics that it depend on, are all okay. So this lets you validate sample ratio mismatch, your metrics quality. Are you logging at the right places? Are you logging enough? And all of that. And then, like I said, monitor your metrics. If there's a key metric, make sure you have validations for those. You have enough guardrails to make sure the metric doesn't start to deteriorate over time. It's important to watch out for correctness and performance. This is ensuring you're logging at the right place and not logging too much. There are times, a couple examples that I can give, where someone decided to log at the top level function and 4 layers in as well, and we ended up double counting, and then you will have to then figure why you're seeing what you're seeing, right? And then it's important to also observe for long-term value. This is a pattern with, let's say, if you're introducing a new engagement thing, you will have novelty effects that you may not be able to weed out of unless you watch out for long-term value. Do holdout groups that helps you see some of these things as well. And then the last thing is if you're a company that also dog foods your own product, it's a very common practice to, let's say, you roll it out to dev, to our dog food group before you roll it out to your production. And then what happens is you may be running control and treatment. Everyone within your company is all on treatment, and you introduce a bug into the control experience, and you don't know until a customer reports that back to you, right? Example, that iOS experiment. I mean, we weren't all signing up every single day, so it was hard to catch that one, but you understand it's important to have people that are dog fooding also seeing control and treatment experiences until you decide to launch your experiment for everyone. Lesson number 5, building the experimentation muscle. Your experimentation muscle starts with the foundational thing, which is your culture. And I'm specifically talking about culture where sharing is the default, it's the norm, not the exception. You want to share both wins as well as failures, because the failures are what's going to teach you the most through running experiments, and you want to make sure everyone in the company learns through these experiments. At Notion, we have most of this data readouts all stored at Notion, which makes it easy. We also have Slack channels, public Slack channels that people can search and opt in to read and follow along as experiment results are being shared with the company. And then when you celebrate lessons, it also lets people be more curious, ask questions in these public forums when they see things. Example is the first one that I talked about, where we more or less declared there's no uplift in metric, and someone was curious and poked into the numbers to see actually Android did better, and then what was the problem, right? So it's important to have a culture where you're staying curious, you're learning through these experiments. The only actual failure when running an experiment is failing to learn from those experiments. The second thing is execution, and by that what I mean is doing experimentation extremely easy for your users. Right? At Notion, what we do is we build templates for our experiments, where when you start an experiment, it comes with a set of standard metrics that we want everyone to look at. It comes with a set of parameters that we want them to fill, and so on and so forth. We also have templates in Notion that people use to figure how to propose an experiment, how to run through an experiment. Teams then take these things and then evolve, adapt. And like I said, there are some teams that are far ahead in the curve in terms of self-serve. They have improved their own process in terms of how to propose, how to decide to run something, how to then run an experiment, present results, make decisions, and move on. And then when you see something that works, obviously make sure you codify it, you can repeat that. And overall, I mean, any product manager or engineer should find it extremely easy to be able to start and run an experiment. Third thing is resilience. As you run through experiments, there are things that will fail. You will have setbacks. Sometimes it's minor. Sometimes it's big lessons that you learn. Sometimes there are bugs that you find. Sometimes it could be an incident, right? And when you have things like that, ensure you have a way to retrospect what failed, what you learned out of this, and make sure you also close the loop. By that I mean follow through on if it's a bug, fix it. If it's a metric quality deteriorating, make sure you have guardrails that way that it doesn't happen again, that you're building on top of strength. And it's important to look and have this mindset, which is turning your setbacks into systemic advantage, right? So each of these experiments is going to teach you something about your user, your product, your business. And the better you understand your users and product and business, it's actually a systemic advantage over time, right? It takes a while. There's no shortcut to wisdom or experience, and building organizational wisdom is exactly the same. So you will go through these, but it's important to turn them into an advantage rather than it feeling like it's setting you back in any meaningful way. And this is the way it'll happen. And then once you go through this a few times, in the sense teams run a few experiments, you are at a point where you start to see some teams moving from needing more support to self-serve, right? Enable those teams to be self-serve, and then learn and make sure more teams move into that zone, right? You use those teams. We have a public Slack channel where there's a community that supports experimenters at Notion. At some point, we can't scale answering every single question, so it's a set of people that have already done these things, seen these things, they answer questions as well. And then as a platform team, you obviously look at the end-to-end experimentation cycle, and whatever things that still feels like overhead, continue to automate so it makes it extremely easy. People have high confidence in the ability to set up and run an experiment through the time. And then, I mean, essentially, this is a flywheel that feeds back into culture, execution, resilience, and accelerate. So it's a cycle that, I mean, once you set this flywheel up, you slowly start to spin, you get acceleration. You're doing well, you're running more experiments, you're running experiments with confidence. A couple callouts, I think, obviously we use Statsig today, and using a platform like that gets a lot of the foundational things for free from a platform perspective. Like sample ratio mismatch is something that they will tell you that's happening, right? But again, you as a team, as a company, will have to still adapt quite a bit of the platform to make sure it works. So you as a company, it's not like a free ride either. So make sure that bridge happens. Your product teams feel pretty well enabled. Recap, one size doesn't fit all. Like, understand teams have different needs. Make sure you understand their needs, cater to their needs well. Second thing is slow creep of chaos. These are systems that are common systems that a lot of people use. It's very easy if you don't pay attention to it. Chaos creeps in, makes it extremely hard. Paper cuts, entropy, people lose a trust in system. Guard against that, fight that fight. See the forest and the trees. Data without segments sometimes can be misleading. Understand your key segments. Make sure you monitor, track them all the time. Measuring the measurer. Make sure this is a system that you're trusting, you're depending on to make large business decisions. Make sure it's trustworthy. Make sure it continues to stay healthy and calibrated. Last, building the experimentation muscle. This is your culture overall. Make sure you invest in it. It's a thing that takes time, but be patient. Improve things, be persistent, it will work. Experimentation is a team sport. Ship fast, ship with confidence. Thank you.